Hello, and welcome to the So Emotional podcast. Here on the cast, we discuss everything emotions through the lens of attachment, the nervous system, and internal parts work. We're a little irreverent and like to have fun exploring the emotional issues and dynamics that interest us. So come along and hang out. Let's explore the fascinating lands of emotions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the So Emotional podcast. I am Angela Wetzel, your host, and this is also your host, Nick Carl. I usually say what we do. I'm a trauma-informed relationship coach with Epic Initiator Coaching, and Nick is a somatic experiencer. And yeah, just like emotional researcher.
Sure.
And we're here in this podcast to help clear up the stigma and enigma around emotions and the emotional journey. And, to help everyone experience way less suffering and hell.
Yeah, or at
Based
least
on what I
talk
went.
about that hell.
Yeah, at least talk about it to help you feel, maybe a little more normal. It's pretty normal to suffer around emotions, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Emotions, they have a bad rap. Like, they're not very popular with a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, they're just in the background, right? You're experiencing them, and it's not like socially acceptable to be like, I'm fucking dying
Right.
inside.
Right. Or like it's kind of funny to think about, like, socially what emotions are acceptable. Like, if someone was like truly excited and was like, oh my god, yay, like everyone gets scared and looks like, what the fuck is going on? If you've seen that in movies where someone's like really happy and really
Right.
excited, people are like, what's wrong with you? Or you can tell they're scared. They're like,
Right.
oh my god, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, there's like a very polite like spectrum of emotions that it's like apparently okay to feel, but anything outside of that, it's like we have to push aside or stuff down or
I mean,
numb out.
I kind of get like the Serengeti. What do they call it? Like a big group of animals. What do they call that?
Herd mentality. Is that what you
Herd.
mean?
Okay, you're in the herd, right? When you're in the herd, you want a certain amount of signals from people that, like, hey, just be fucking chill. I don't want any kind of bullshit. I don't want you to be happy. Don't want you to be too sad. Honestly, just like keep your heads up. If I see something from you, it better be like a signal to me about what's like on the horizon, Otherwise, just keep it in your pants, you know what I'm saying? Like, chill the fuck out. So, like, I get
Yeah.
that. Like, that's part of
Yeah, sure.
how it all works, right? But I think it leaves a lot.
Yeah, it's like the animal part of us is like, wait, why is this person so excited, or why are they screaming, or noise? Why is there noise? Because there's basic human fears: fear of falling, loud noises, death, dismemberment,
Right.
abandonment. I forget what all the ones are, but there's like a pretty decent list of very common ones, which we learned on another podcast that vomiting is on that list too. Big one. Fear of vomiting. Anyway, I'm digressing. So today's podcast, we had one last time. Was it last time? Was it last one? Or the
Last one
before?
was about victim.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Okay. So we had one before that around polyamory. And so because we had that one, we thought we might as well talk about monogamy and just some of the perspectives around that. And just relationships. So do you have somewhere that you like want to dive in, or just some observations or thoughts?
I think, to me, I think about start at the beginning, right? Why do you want to be in relationship with anybody, right? Why not just be alone forever? Wouldn't that be easier? Maybe.
No,
Well, yeah,
maybe.
and no. And I think no. Because the human condition, I think it's a basic building block of who we are, right? Because we talked about this in putting it in needs, right? Connection, right? Relationship is fundamental. It's down there with our basic needs of like breathing, food, and water.
Yeah, we're social tribal creatures.
Right. Social tribal creatures. And so I guess when we're talking about monogamy, then we're talking about uh, dichotomous relationships between sexes, right? I guess it can be same sex. There's same sex monogamy too, but like when people get into relationships, do monogamous relationships, do you necessarily have to be having sex with somebody to be in a relationship? Like, what's the line when a thing becomes a relationship?
Right. Well, it's interesting that like even the term like monogamy, mono one, gammy. I don't know
What's
what that.
gammy? Let's look it up
Look
because
it up.
I was actually thinking about
Yeah, I
it
was
too.
like, what is gammy? Like polygamy, gammy.
Gammy. Okay.
Mhm.
What etymology? Yeah, here we go.
Well, as you look that up, yeah, so it's kind of interesting to think about how we look at our relationships or how we structure relationships, because truly, like, very few people ever have just one relationship in their life, and really it's, I think, pertaining to like a more,
Okay, I
what does
got
it
it.
say?
Okay. 1610s is when it shows up. From the French monogamy, from the Latin monogamia, from Greek monogamia, single marriage. Okay, so mono is
Mm.
single, gamy is marriage, gamos is marriage.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So a lot of people don't even do single marriage anymore. It's not one person that you get married to and till death do you part kind of thing. And it was never going to be that way because life is so very unpredictable. Like, um, can literally watch, I mean, well, if you watch like historical dramas or anything like from the beginning of time, it's just like even if someone's been married, you've probably seen Les Mis and you know that it doesn't matter. Like, anyway, that's a reference to a really depressing story about this this woman who like gets married and then she pretty much gets pregnant and is abandoned by the father for whatever reason. And it was just like, you know, even back then when marriage was something that was like super serious, um it still had no guarantees, and it still has no guarantees. But
It's actually making more sense to me now. Single marriage,
okay.
right? Okay, because
Mm-hmm.
up until recently, it's like I'm thinking about the biological DNA implications of like you want to pass on your DNA, so you
Right.
like try to put it in.
Multi-pollination.
Well, you put it in this wrapper of called marriage, like single marriage, monogamy, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have your kids because up until not very long ago, maybe 100 years ago, it's like you had your kids and then you're alive for like 5 more years and then you're dead, right?
Oh yeah.
So
Wait, when were they dying? In their 30s
like
or
30s and
four?
40s, right?
That's pretty young, yeah.
It's pretty young. So it's just like you have a pretty small time window of like you got to do this. And so I think it's like way more prescriptive of like where it comes from. It's like, well, you got to do this. We're going to wrap it up so that we can protect our bloodlines, right? Protect our
Right.
genes.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it is definitely indicative of another time as well. And like around, I'm guessing around like the origins of the institution of marriage, like that came with like the church and property and bloodlines and inheritances and dowries and all those things, you know,
Right, right.
protecting fortunes and
Property
political
rights. Yeah.
property rights. And then, you know, at times women, up until when, still being,
Maybe like 100
well,
years
and
ago, 50
no,
years
well,
ago.
in some countries still are just treated as property,
Right.
passed, you know, passed on as property. Yeah, so um it's interesting. I think marriage is like, has just been something that little girls like fantasize about, like it being a certain like marker of like, oh, where I want to be, where I get to be, like maybe the Barbie dream house with Ken,
Yeah.
like get to have
Right.
this whole life, and it's sort of like a status symbol. But really what marriage is it's an adult relationship. It's a committed adult relationship. And then if the thing that makes it complex is of course the legality of it. So not only are you in this committed relationship, but there's all this like legal stuff where your names are bound and they get in
Social
trouble.
contract.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like tied up in it. And usually what's interesting is you likely won't know until your first adult relationship what kind of traumas you've inherited.
Mm-hmm.
Usually that's when you start discovering like what the fuck is going on. Like I call it blind inheritance. So yeah, because I had a couple boyfriends like in high school, and then I got married like right when I turned 20, like
Whoa.
May. Yes. So
Damn.
yes. Did you know that?
Well, you were 20? No,
Yeah.
in my mind, I imagined you were like 26 or 28.
No, that's when I was getting divorced.
20.
Yeah, I had just
It's pretty. I feel
yeah.
like that 20 is pretty young, pretty
It is
naive.
very it's very young.
Yeah.
I had no clue whatsoever. No clue. And the brain isn't even formed until 25.
Mm.
So, yeah, the adult brain.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting, like, well, I was in the military, and it made sense to do like the Army Married Couples program.
Okay.
And we had been dating for about a year, and then we decided we wanted to be together, and we were going to be separated. Well, we were both going to be stationed in Korea, and I was going to be stationed up north, I think, by the DMZ. I think Camp Red Cloud maybe is where I was supposed to go. I don't remember.
Okay.
And then he was supposed to go to Camp Humphreys. So I ended up going with him
Mm-hmm.
to Camp Humphreys. And yeah, so we decided we wanted to stay together. And so that was like part of it. So we were like, yeah, let's get married. But we were engaged as well anyway. So there was a plan to get married. It's sped up quite a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so then we eloped in Vegas and we ended up having our regular wedding like after that. But oh my God, like were we young? Yeah. In my opinion, like too young to get married.
What at the time is going on with your attachment styles, yours and his, when you're 20? Like, what do you? What's happening there?
Um that's a good question. Like I have to look back and see. I see counterdependence looking back at some of
Counterdependence. Okay.
some of my behaviors.
Yes.
Um, I remember having a certain like relationship to relationships about not wanting to be in them,
Okay.
like not wanting to feel like someone had power over me. So there was like something about like a power dynamic or like a power struggle.
Okay. That seems antithetical to being married.
Yeah, it does. But so that was more in the early stages of the relationship,
Okay. Sure.
not with the marriage
Sure.
necessarily, but
Okay.
more of like getting into relationships, being a little bit more
Yeah. Hesitant or just
like,
yeah.
or I'm just not interested until
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Right.
So
Not gonna get your hooks on me, buddy boy.
maybe I've always been like that though. Yeah, I've never been like majorly like rushing in and being like, oh my God, he's the one. Like, I've never really been that person.
Well, one of the things we talked about in the polyamory cast was because like I think that you could talk about any of these subjects for eons, right?
Yeah.
Was this idea of the avoidant person avoiding like intimacy, right? To try to
Mm-hmm.
and mitigating that by engaging in a type of like power struggle. So there's some kind of power dynamics there, and then using these structures as a way to kind of keep all those things where they should be. And I
Yeah.
wonder if, like, reflexively, looking through that same kind of lens, that, um, and
Right.
I'm
I
sure
see
that.
what you're asking now. You didn't necessarily mean me specifically, did you?
No, I mean, I'm interested in you specifically, but I don't know that if you follow that same, because the person or the relationship that we were talking about in the other cast was completely hypothetical. We're just imagining somebody could
Right.
do it that way through this lens, like trying to use the attachment model, sort of like this is one way it could go, right? Everybody's an individual, and like their own little, quirks and features are going to be to and of their own.
Right. So I would say those that end up married could likely come from any attachment category, truly.
Sure.
Secure people obviously like are gonna feel good about that relationship and get married. It's gonna feel comfortable, safe, secure. It's gonna work out.
Right.
Those that are anxious might want to speed into marriage or speed into relationship or speed into moving together because they're going to want that security and assurance and affirmation. So
Okay.
they're going to want to like, latch onto that and like lock it down.
Sure.
A disorganized type will be both anxious and avoidant.
Right.
So their anxious side is going to be more like, let's do this. And then when they're in it, they're going to be like, what the fuck did I do? And then they'll be like, I love you now. And then I don't. And so like kind of hot and cold dance.
Yes.
And then there, like, if you think about there being a spectrum of attachment, like, really it's all just based on safety in or out of proximity. If you just think about the nervous system, it's just navigating that safety. And so you can have people that are avoidant to different degrees.
Sure.
So this was something I actually, I remember recently, I think it was yesterday maybe, I brought up the book He's Scared, She's Scared, which is a really great book. That I think is more specifically geared towards avoidant, like attachment stuff, like commitment phobic things, which is it's really good. Highly recommend. Highly recommend. But you can be avoidant and like have certain thresholds or things where you're like beyond that, like no, because when you enter into a relationship, like there's going to be more commitment, like you're spending more time, and now you're doing this, and now there's a child, and now there's a house, and if you really like let that impact your nervous system, you can close your eyes and just see what that does to your nervous system. Like think about being with someone, and think about having the child, think about having the house and the mortgage and the job and the responsibility, and now there's 2 children, and now it's 10 years, and now it's this, and it's just like start to think about like whatever blocks that your nervous system has to that level of commitment, or whatever fears or whatever limiting beliefs or whatever parts are still there that are unhealed, are going to have things to say. And I think it's all going to depend on each person's unique trauma. So if you had a parent pass, let's say, when you were growing up, and what you saw, like a marriage, like let's say your parents were happy and then one of them passed at a certain point in time. If you get married and you're getting close to that age, you and your partner are getting close to that age, it might be normal for you to try to get out of there before you experience the same thing at that same point in time. Right. So there's just it just depends on what the traumas are, because the nervous system, like, it takes an entire like energetic snapshot of everything that's happening. It's not just like the conversations, but it's like the subtext, the body language, the smells in the air, the temperature, like the time of day, like numbers, like it notices all those things.
So I don't know what the stats are right now. Maybe should have looked it up on like 5 years. Like how many marriages last 5 years,
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Let's just, for the argument, let's just say 50% do, okay? Right, because I think that like divorce rates are like 50%. I don't know what the time scale is though, okay? But then I think
yeah.
But then I think about, okay, so for the 50% of marriages that, we'll say, survived, that continued on, how could we sort of like rank those as like healthy, generative, expansive, creative, right? As opposed to just hanging on, which leads me to think about, okay, you get yourself into a relationship, and whether you get sort of married or not, well, like what are the factors, which I think what are the factors that can allow people to grow through their traumas, okay, either grow through their traumas, grow used to their traumas, and then fly sort of like parallel, which is something I see all the time in a lot of relationships. It's just like, yeah, we'll get to know each other, and then we'll sort of hang out. Maybe it takes a couple of years or something, but then once we establish like our flight pattern, whatever that is, and then that's it. And then there is a trajectory to, the fecundant success. Not necessarily just of birthing children, but I think about just like birthing like any kind of growth or or business, or maybe whatever it is that the couple engages in, as far as like the energy and the curiosity and the vitality that they're coming together. Because I think that there is strength in relationship, right? And there can be strength gained from monogamy, right? So I think about, which is something I know that you work with people on, is like overcoming their own defense mechanisms so that they can even begin to approach a relationship, right?
Yeah.
But I know that like getting married and monogamy, it's like, yes, and I will second what you said. It's like when I was a child, right, I had an idea of what relationship was, and it mostly came from Disney movies, and there was an aspect that very much was like a Disney movie. Like falling in love was amazing. It was an amazing feeling that lasted a couple of weeks,
Yeah. Those
or whatever it
hormones are
was.
great.
It was. I can just remember like feeling like I was holding hands with her and we're just running through a field together. I was just like, oh my god, like of my heart like bursting out of my chest, with just like these fireworks and gemstones and just like angels singing from above. It was like that. And then like the next day comes, like my fantasies as a child never took me past that. Like I didn't know I just thought you stayed there forever. You enter heaven and then you're in heaven forever. But that's not what happens. Like it starts to sort of like change around. So it's like, my patterns are disorganized. And so it's like this going in, and then I learned eventually that it's when intimacy becomes apparent, or like we cross the line of intimacy, when somebody begins to see deep inside of me, that it is extremely uncomfortable for me.
Right.
And then
I want you to pick back up. So I want you to bookmark, but I do want to say this really quickly. Something to remember is we are not like our attachment pattern all the time, because like right now we're in secure attachment because we're safely co-regulating.
Yes.
This is secure attachment.
Okay.
And so it's like how we gain secure attachment or stay there is by like navigating all those triggers and like working through those fears. So it's like in that moment when you felt so good and so safe, it was easy to be in secure attachment, securely attached. But then as the risk increased and then the chance for intimacy increased, then your stuff starts to come up. And when we're not able to address the triggers for either attachment fears, then we end up being disorganized or in one or more of the other attachment styles, like more often.
And with no way to contextualize that whatsoever, didn't even know that was a thing, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So it becomes like an otherworldly process that comes in, and it is extremely confusing, right? So the way my brain processed it is that, oh, what's happening here, I'm having bad feelings, so what's happening here is bad, so I got to get out of here. And then I would get out of there, and then it's like, oh gosh, these feelings aren't good over here either. I kind of miss her a little bit. I wonder what she's doing, And then it's like, it just became ping pong city, right? And even after like three, whatever, after like the first or the second time, I was like, I started to see like how wild it was, and it was a terrible feeling, like feeling that, because I felt completely stuck. I was like, this doesn't work, because if I go there, I know that like I know what happens when I go there because I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
It won't last, and I know what's here, which is I want to be there. So it's like that is absolutely crazy making, crazy.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like in relationships, a lot of people don't really know what to expect because in the absence of like healthy relationships being modeled or like a healthy generative marriage being modeled,
Mm-hmm.
people will just replicate, pardon me, what they saw from
Yeah.
their parents' relationship or what they've seen on TV or out in the world, or just what their experience is, which may be quite limited depending on their own like socioeconomic circle, like what they
Right.
have exposure to, and then of
Right.
course like what their nervous system is swimming in
Mm-hmm.
this whole time. And so if you have securely attached parents that know how to you know, show affection, physical affection, proper boundaries, proper sexual, financial, emotional, mental, spiritual boundaries, treat each other with respect.
Yeah. Uh, argue constructively and not destructively.
Yeah, right. And it's not about like the like length of time or just being married. Like length of time means like you could just be excellent at suffering and stuffing down your emotions and
Right.
ignoring shit and just deciding that you're going to stay together and be miserable. So like length isn't how we would measure success, but I would say um like does is your relationship like generative? Is there like sauce there, like juice, like fruit? These are like weird ways of saying it. I guess what I'm saying is like, is it good? Is it good? Like, does
Barbecue
it?
sauce.
But do like I don't
Yeah.
know. Is
V.
it like
Yeah. Like,
yeah, like
yeah. Does it
saucy?
raise
Like
you up? Does it
yeah, is
raise
it
you
like
up?
really good? Is it like yes? Like I love this. Like this is amazing. Like I'm in love. I love this person. I respect them. We have passion and purpose together. This is what we do together. We enjoy our time apart. We respect each other. Like we trust each other. Like is it good? Like that should be what the litmus test is
Yeah,
of
and I think
relationships.
about too, like Esther Hicks talks about it. It's like where it's trending, right? You know, so like what you described for a second, I'm thinking about something very highfalutin. Like the passion and all this stuff. And which makes me think about Esther Perel and about how connection and solidity and knowing somebody's going to be there is a little antithetical to the ideas of
Yeah, the
passion, right?
passion, like
So,
the yeah.
which is that's some tricky shit, which is real. That's something that you sort of have to deal with.
Yeah, because we need to like we're always navigating like that. Like I think in life too, if you think about it, it's not just in our relationships, it's in life. Like if you're in the comfort zone all the time, like
Mm-hmm.
life doesn't happen in the comfort zone, but it's good to have a certain amount of comfort because you don't
Yeah,
want to be flinging yourself out into the unknown all the time because then you're like frying your nervous system and you're
right.
like always jumping off cliffs, like trying to like crochet your fucking net
Yeah.
or whatever you're
I
doing.
imagine if I was like a skydiver, I would be doing it on the weekends.
Right. So
And
you
during
want
the
to
week,
balance.
yeah,
Yeah, you want to balance your comfort with like excitement. So
right.
when you find yourself in a relationship and there's so much, just so much I want to talk about and say, but we'll see how much I can get to. um, in relationships, it can be really normal to find yourself in a routine and then blaming your partner or even kind of blaming yourself for being like stuck in this routine, but
Right.
it can become comfortable. And then instead of like taking risks and having to have the awkward conversations or deal with your partner's emotions when
Yeah.
you're like, hey, I'm going to do this and I know you don't agree with me, but
Right.
I want to take this course or I want to better myself or I want to go on this
Yeah.
trip or this is what I want to do. It's like your own individuation path. Like we need to be individuals and really stay in alignment with our own sense of purpose and who we are. And that actually needs to come first and foremost, because if we don't have that, then there's no way we can offer any sense of polarity. And if there's
Right.
no polarity, there's absolutely no attraction. Like that's a
Yes.
major boner killer for everyone
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But you can't be in that place where there's like no trust and no reciprocity and no sense of safety either, because you can't really build from that place either. It's all chaos. And
Right.
so
So
I
that balancing act sounds tricky.
it is tricky. And well, it's the same thing that we are being asked to do with our own lives, and like following our own sense of purpose is trying to find that comfortable comfortable area, like growth edge, comfort with a growth edge, like things that excite us, us moving towards our fears, confronting them, doing the healing work, expanding, evolving, all of that, and like finding the excitement and the joy and the passion. Because
Right.
if you've got that going on within yourself, you're going to have a lot to offer someone in relationship. But if
Right.
you don't have that going on yourself, and you're not feeding your own soul, you're gonna be like, blah, I'm just gonna Netflix and let's
Right.
just get some Chinese food and sit.
I know, like the last relationship I was in, it was like a couple years in, and we had kind of, there's a lot of dynamics happening, but one of the dynamics that happens is that is the amount of comfort, right? And I could kind of see that like the comfort kind of led to like a lessening of the polarity, which I think is something that happens is naturally happening for people all the time, right? In monogamous relationships, like you can see
Yeah.
old couples that look like each other because they have balanced out their energy and kind of come together, and now they're just like reflections of each other, you know?
So the more men and women, when they spend a lot of time together, estrogen is highly influential on testosterone, cause it
Mm-hmm.
to drop. And
Right.
like John Gray writes a lot about this in his book. Like it's really fascinating. But we actually need our space, and we like men need like the man cave time
Right.
to create more of that tension and polarity. Otherwise, he's like, I'm kind of bored, and also I'm starting to feel hormonal and kind of more emotional than I would. And that's because his testosterone starts to drop, and then he's actually having more like female hormones running through his body, or
Mm-hmm.
that's like more heightened than normal.
Mm-hmm.
And he needs to like replenish his own testosterone.
Right.
But in
Makes
codependent relationships, people get enmeshed and they get too comfortable, and then they're together all the time. And no wonder they're bored as fuck, because that's
right.
boring.
Yeah. It makes me think about the Chris Bale kind of stuff about not masturbating and not coming anymore.
Mm.
Because like I played around a little bit with that and not doing that at all, and yeah, I don't know if it makes. I don't know. His argument is that like it does like raise your testosterone. I've seen arguments both ways on that. That it
Mm.
does provide a little bit of a spike, but I knew that like when I just think about the energetics of sort of like coming and letting that stuff go for a man, right? Because it's like you're on your edge, and then you sort of let all that go, and like you physically release all this stuff. Then what comes next? All kinds of emotions, right?
Mm.
So holding on to that, it's pretty interesting. When I've played around with it and like not dabbled in that at all and held it down, it did polarize me more. Like it gave me like a different kind of energetic base to work from instead of, because obviously I have estrogen and I have hormones, and my energy can get very sort of spun up, and I'll have sort of bad days and stuff. But I know
Mm.
that when I have played around with uh, augmenting or like trying to keep my testosterone inside of me, it did help sort of like ground me in something
Mm.
different. I just think that's
Mm.
interesting because I imagine if you're like, say, living in very close quarters with somebody and like spending tons of time with them and like maybe having like lots of sex where you're like coming a lot, that like that could, those two energies just sort of start to balance each other out.
Maybe if you're doing that and then those people don't have their respective jobs or hobbies,
Right.
then yeah, it's not gonna work for very long. The other thing, this isn't really just maybe not discussed as much, but since we're talking about the hormonal thing, it's interesting how many people have dysregulated hormones and how that actually is very much affecting like their mood and their drives and
Sure.
abilities to
Right.
like be in partnership and feel good and also being sexually intimate. And when you think about like the amount of hormones that end up in our water supply and coming through in plastic,
Right. And our
different
foods. Yeah.
foods,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that men and women, I mean, I think everyone is they're struggling to some degree with keeping their hormones or like making sure that they have the right neurohormone precursors, which
Sure.
those are really just um, things that are needed so that you can create dopamines, uh, serotonin, oxytocin,
Right.
and endorphins and things like that.
So it's like we talk about the emotional level of things, right? And all our traumas that can come up, which is one dimension of how it can interact with and affect relationships, right? But what you're describing now is like this physical, like 3D body level of things that
Yeah.
can really be dysregulated in and of itself, and the two can affect each other. Absolutely, right?
Yeah, like, well, trauma, of course, can so any kind of trauma, like what that does is it's like it becomes an unresolved thing to your nervous system. So then
Mm-hmm.
it's looking out for neuroception. Your nervous system is going to be looking out for circumstances of that thing happening again. And then your body will be using resources and kind of staying in that fight flight
Yeah.
place. And then you're using up
Right.
a lot of minerals and vitamins, and it's like having your foot on the gas all the time, and that's going to affect everything, like a chain reaction on your entire body.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time you get to be maybe in your 30s, then you might have some kind of autoimmune thing or
Gut
issues with your
issues. Yeah.
gut, IBS, or just any number of
Right.
unexplainable body pain, loss of hair, just like mood swings. I mean, there's a lot of things that can present from trauma that's all related to
Right.
that source, like the body being dysregulated. I don't plan on having this conversation. We are talking about marriage, but it is part of partnership. Like if you don't feel good, it's gonna be hard to like
Get
to
together and like
be
enjoy yourself. Right.
yeah, be generous in a relationship. And I think with marriage, it's like people can come at it from a place of, oh, once I get married, it's all gonna like I'm gonna hit that landmark and everything's gonna be better and I'm gonna be with my person. And it's like,
Mm.
no.
No.
It doesn't. I wish it worked like that, but the whole like you have to consider the cycle of like rupture and repair. So when you're on your own life journey, and you're getting outside of your comfort zone and you're confronting your fears, there's going to be a situation where you find yourself like in this pattern of tension. Like there's an issue or a problem or maybe several, and you're like, I don't know what the solution is, but I'm noticing all this stuff. And so you're like feeling very stressed out, tense, afraid, like you're in the illusion of whatever it is. Like your
Mm-hmm.
past is like coming up against like the present pretty harshly.
Right.
So you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm afraid this thing's going to happen. This thing that happened in the past. I'm trying to stay open here, but I'm freaked out and I don't know what's next. And I'm trying to like calm and regulate myself. Well, eventually there's a breakthrough, like something happens, like something new happens, or who knows, maybe it spins out, it gets worse, but at some point there's going to be a shift. And then there's like relief. It's kind of the same in relationship where your patterns then bump up against someone else's patterns, and then you have that rupture or disagreement or fight or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got to go within and work it out within yourself and like do your best to like turn away from the whole adversarial energy, like, oh, it's their fault, they're the one that did this, they're a horrible
Right.
person, they're
Yes.
after me, they have bad intentions.
Mm-hmm.
To say, this energy is within me. Like the reason why I feel a charge here is because I've got stuff going on with this.
Right.
So if I'm feeling it, like where am I dishing it out? But also like where did it begin?
Mm.
Where is it showing up in me?
Mm-hmm.
Let me take full responsibility for my patterns, my trauma, and my emotions, do my work, and then come back to my partner and like offer what I've learned or offer, you know, wanting to know more about their perspective, and then come back together and you can have a deeper healing and a deeper sense of trust. But that happens with you going within and developing that deeper sense of trust within yourself, like trusting yourself to have your own back instead of staying in a victimized position where they're
Mm.
wrong and they're just hurting you.
Right. Do you think that in monogamy relationship or just relationship in general, you get together, you'll have your patterns, things will come up, there will be um, discord, right? And then let's say that you have two people who are dedicated as much as they can be to repair, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I've heard this, but I don't know if it's just like theory or the idea. But the idea is that like the more that you repair and you actually do the work,
Mm-hmm.
then the deeper the trust goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you see that at all when you practice with
Um,
people about like being able to navigate certain things and like it actually in deepening or like that's what I kind of think about. It's like on a long timeline with somebody who's like committed to you in a monogamous relationship to like okay,
mm-hmm.
of being open, like having the hard conversations, continuing to feel, and like understanding that like you're not in an adversarial like because it's tricky. It's a weird dynamic in weird dimensions, but that the more that you can negotiate, the more that you can actually open up, the more that you can then overcome together and repair, it actually can strengthen the bond and actually grow
Yeah.
trust. Growing trust is what I'm thinking about.
Well, that sense of growing trust and security in that relationship is based on all of the many patterns of rupture and repair, where the repair has brought a lot of understanding and compassion between both people. And then the more that happens, like then you know that you can always get to that repair place,
Mm,
and then that's something that you can come to rely on that becomes consistent, and then you
right.
trust that that person's going to do their work and you're going to do your work and you're going to do your best. So it kind of gives this generosity of like spirit and compassion to the relationship.
Mm,
And not only have like I've heard so many people talk about this, saying like I've been through so many things with this person, like this other person could never understand that, like we've been through this.
right.
And it's like, yeah.
But it also makes me think of too, like when I've been in a relationship, because there has been things that come up. There will be things that come up, right? But there's a fear around that negotiation. Like if I don't have like a great, you know, and this is when I think about like trajectories. Like I think like getting closer, getting closer, getting closer, and then a thing comes up, and then I kind of abandon like, well, that's too that tamale's too spicy. I'm just going to avoid that thing, just like bury it
Yeah,
instead of bringing it up.
right, which is super normal and more of an avoidant flavor, because it's like if I can avoid this emotional reaction, or if I can avoid this confrontation because I don't know what's going to happen,
Right.
like I fear some. So there's a fear like um there's going to be an explosion, it could be I'm going to be hurt, I'm going to hurt them, I'll have to take care of them, I will feel guilty, like it's just a number of things, like for whatever reason. Or it could just be an unknown fear, like I just don't know if I can survive it, I don't know what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
which is super normal. But it also tends to perpetuate those patterns
Yeah.
where you don't get the opportunity to um, trust yourself, to like have your own back no matter what, and then you also don't get to see how that person really would have reacted
Right.
in that situation.
Yeah.
But if you're operating out of old patterns, the old patterns can do a really good job of actually making the thing happen that you're afraid is going to happen. And then you'll
Right.
say, oh, I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah, I knew this is where it was going the whole time.
Which is tricky because so it's like when you find yourself in that place where you're really scared, there's going to be an impulse or something that you're going to want to do, which is like, if you turn away, it kind of fulfills the prophecy on one end.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're filled with all this fear that you're going to be attacked, then likely your timing's going to suck and you're going to go to that person when it's like you're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to use the wrong phrase, the tone. Like you're going
Right.
to just come at it in a weird way and it will cause the thing.
Right.
And so you actually have to be really careful about the energy that you're bringing into your interaction. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like you need to clean it up yourself as much as you can. Like get the support you need with like your coach or counselor, or therapist or group, whatever you're working on. And then step towards the fear, like, take that
Right.
risk,
Yes.
that measured risk, and then see what new information is there. Because without the new information, you're just going to keep creating that same cycle of
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable, I'm gonna dive.
Yeah. Like I can almost remember the moment when I got to that threshold, and then my strategy shifted just because it was too much on the line in the moment, and I didn't have any of these types of ideas or structures in my brain to deal with it. And so when it got too big, I just turned away, and then honestly that's when now it's drifting apart. There's like space that is growing in between our two hearts, and without and the farther we drift away, like that, the chasm is bigger. At the point where I couldn't jump was honestly the point where the relationship ended. And then it was just like waiting for because as space grows, it didn't take long for like her to begin to feel that, and
Mm,
all these other sort of ancillary things start to play out in the space in between. But I feel like it's like comes down to like one moment where that all begins, and then I just take a particular protective strategy.
it's kind of like the timeline of fear, because we either choose fear or we choose intimacy.
Right.
So I either let someone into my experience and I risk vulnerability and I risk letting someone else know how I really feel about something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stand in the fire of whatever I fear, like I can't survive.
Yes.
Because if I truly have my own back and I know that I am worthy of love and connection no matter what, even if this person rejects me, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like part of that is remembering that we're adults and like we have other places to go. Um, but if we're able to stand our own ground, then when we open, I think it's such an important risk to take because it's actually choosing yourself in that moment.
Mm.
It's like when you choose yourself in that moment to share yourself, it's like you already win because it's not about winning that other person. It's about you choosing yourself in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. And then that person gets to see you. And if they reject anything that you're showing them within themselves, they will reject themselves, but they'll project it onto you. Does that make sense? They'll be
It
like,
does.
"Oh no, not acceptable."
Yeah.
So if you're not solid within yourself, you will take their rejection personally to
Mm-hmm.
make it about you when it's not really about you.
Right.
So it's it's important that I this is like one of the biggest things, I think probably one of the biggest things I see a lot is people like hiding how they
Mm-hmm.
feel or not really
Mm-hmm.
wanting to share this, or like they might have a fantasy, they might have a fear, like just something, or I was thinking about them, or this hurt my feelings, or I felt
Right.
worried, I saw this and I felt worried.
Yeah.
And it's like so much people are wanting to like hold this inside, and that um instead of like choosing to share that in a way, when you close off, you're choosing more of the pathway of fear and avoidance
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like opening to it. But I do think it doesn't mean that you just become like you just vomit everything on everyone and you just share everything.
Right.
I think it means that you learn first how to ground within yourself and really fully accept that within yourself, because when you're when you can fully love and understand where that's coming from, and you don't need outside reassurance or validation from them, it removes all of the charge from the situation. You're not
Mm.
pulling on them and you're not pushing on them. You're saying, this is who I am. I'm going to let you see me in this moment for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so okay with myself and an acceptance of myself because I know this is my truth, that whether or not you accept it in this moment or whatever you do, it's going to be like yours.
Mm.
And it's just it changes the dynamic of the relationship, because it moves it from being codependent to it being interdependent, because you are fully self-sovereign, fully grounded, and aligned with yourself. And then you get to interact with this other person from this place of power, as opposed to needing and pulling and pushing and trying
Right.
to manipulate or get something so that you feel better, you feel safer.
Yeah, and it just brings the energetic dance into a more overt, like out in the open, instead of a covert, like playing like shell games and
Yeah.
like all the implied things, or having to sort of like read past people's reactions, down into like what's actually happening inside them.
Right.
It's like a marriage of the inside with the outside, and like being okay with that.
Yeah, open communication. um and it's interesting because really the only reason why people hide themselves is out of that fear and protection.
Yeah.
It's because they fear being rejected, or they fear being abandoned, or they fear being swallowed or attacked,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah.
um and then that's what can cause us to disown certain parts of us, which is something that children often do. They'll be like, oh, when I went up to, you know, show my mom or dad something, they looked annoyed, they were busy.
Right.
So I'm going to take that in, and instead of being enthusiastic or being open and sharing, I'm not going to bother them. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to remember that this was too much. And then
Yeah.
now there's a pattern of, I'm too much.
Right.
This is how I'm going to tone it down. And then it's like that flow of love and reciprocity and intimacy that was there has now, like, the bandwidth on that has been shut down, and then we can become more and more and more shut down to letting our full expression out, which trauma is like a hardening and closing of arteries, whereas
Mm-hmm.
intimacy is like that open, like blood flow, that flush,
Right.
that, yeah, that beautiful flow and openness. And it's like, um I don't need strategy. Like anytime we find ourselves like in strategy, that's fear based. That's like
Hmm.
thinking and planning and organizing.
Right.
If you need strategy, then it assumes that there's an adversary or something worth winning or losing in this
Yeah.
case. And then it
Manipulating.
becomes,
Yeah.
yeah, and then it becomes like too precious for you to really show all your cards, right?
Right. Yeah.
But the open heart, when you're brave enough to risk intimacy, uh, you don't need strategy, because you're already like full and secure here. And then you're
Mm-hmm.
just offering, you're just
Mm-hmm.
showing up as your expression and just being like, here, this is me,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Well, yeah, I know. I have some fears that get in the way of that occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
and I've been practicing strategies my whole life, so I'm trying to let that go. And just what you're describing, I think too, is one of the things that goes along with that, if you can get there, is the whole idea about not being or detaching, right? Detachment,
Yeah.
which is just like, I'm here. This is who I'm with. Um, Having no issue being whatever you are. You know, and it does help too if you don't have like a bunch of triggers, happening all the time and putting you in perspectives of or putting you in dynamics of up and down and power and all that kind of shit, right?
I think what you just said though, like describes the human journey. It's like every single person navigating, just navigating that journey to intimacy. Like complete intimacy is like complete openness and
Right.
just like
Yeah.
connection, right?
Yeah.
All the time. But we're humans, so we're always going to be like navigating our fears or like shutting down or being like, I'm not sure about this, or I don't,
Right.
want to share, I
Yeah.
don't want to talk about this. And like that doesn't just go for our relationships, but our careers and like what we present to the world, and in every single relationship that we have, to like every single thing.
It makes the idea that what you're describing though makes me start to like imagine a character or an energy of what it is, right? Especially with the detachment, that's like if you could be in a creative space, which is like I think it's like it's up, it's like a little bit curious, but also sort of like know what you are and you're okay to share exactly whatever you are.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think still too being like responsive and receptive and like knowing sort of like when to put your foot forward and take it back. Life is always like a dance.
Mm-hmm.
But not being too, not necessarily being concerned with the outcome of what it is, because of what your own internal security sort of affords you, or can afford you,
Yeah.
right? When you're not under the gun.
Yeah, the thing that I like to make a distinction around, when it comes to attachment, is I view, like grabbing onto something, uh, for security can be a hyper attachment, like when
Mm-hmm.
you grab on really quickly and tightly.
Yeah.
So hyper attachment, that's like more of the anxious style. And then detachment is usually the avoidant. They'll just cut off or numb.
Right.
So they'll become detached from something. And then, like the sweet spot is that non-attachment place, which if you just think of the word like non-attached, it's like, oh, I'm not attached to anything, but
Yeah.
it's mostly not attaching like to the outcome. It's kind of holding something like loosely or gently. And
Right.
it doesn't mean like you're grabbing onto it, and it doesn't mean
And
you're
it
just
doesn't mean
letting it
you're
go.
not there with like your whole heart or your whole being either, right? You can
Right.
you can be fully like open and there and as, as
It
loving and as
is,
present.
yeah, it is like unconditional love. It is an
Mm,
offering.
right.
It's just like an offering. That's how I see it.
Is that are we still on monogamy? Where did we go?
I don't know. We went where it needed to go, I guess. Um, I don't know if there were other things to say about monogamy except, really the deal with monogamy or polyamory or whatever it is. It's like people will make meaning out of it, like like if we were to, like strip away all the subjective reality from monogamy or marriage, because it's so loaded with stuff if you think about it.
Sure,
Like you
sure,
can
sure,
even
sure.
feel into the collective heaviness around monogamy and marriage, because
Yes.
literally we could just start to like riff and just say, when you think about marriage or monogamy, then what words come up?
Right.
Ball and chain, betrayal, cheating,
Right.
wedlock, like
Yes.
just
Yes.
right. And so there can be a lot of heavy stuff,
Right.
and there can also be a lot of light stuff. You can think of like wedding cakes
Sure.
and
Yeah.
parties and fun and love, right? So there's a giant,
But
uh,
objectively,
yeah, but objectively, it's like two people. coming together, committing, uh, bringing their lives together, moving, building something together, creating something together.
Right.
More objectively, it's like that's what it is.
Yeah.
And then our society, there's a legal element
Yeah.
to it. And then everything else is put on by everyone's experiences or their filters or the collective
Right.
trauma or your own generational or familial trauma around what
Mm-hmm.
that institution is. So if you were a child and you had parents that were married and their marriage was very unhappy, like you might have baggage around marriage.
Mm-hmm.
You might want to like swear off marriage. It depends. Like every personality, every child in the family is different. It depends on personality and
Right.
how you interpret things or what your own experience was at
Mm-hmm.
that age, whatever. um, and that's going to depend on like how you view marriage or what you see monogamy as.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that monogamy doesn't have to mean boredom or growing stale. I think it can really be a blissful, like deep exploration into deep intimacy,
Yeah.
like really getting to know yourself and another human,
Yeah.
like
It's like a
reflecting back to each other.
right. Every moment is a golden opportunity. It's like you got to think about how I guess lucky that you are to like have somebody there who's committed to like
Mhm.
trying to build a thing, and hope
Yeah.
like hopefully there's a conversation about like what you want to work on in your marriage or like what your sort of expectations or ideals are. Maybe there's not.
Usually, I don't know, I would say usually there's not, but I'm hoping. I think I'm hoping that there's going to be more trending, way more trending on um, extramarital counseling and therapy for people just in relationships, because the idea is to, I think, be able to work towards being able to commit to consistency with someone.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't want to say, like, in the whole polyamory thing, like I I'm not here to tell people what's right for them. I think everyone has their own journey, and like
Yeah,
every
you get to
relationship
yeah, you get to
that
figure
you,
out your own life.
yeah, you figure it out, cuz like you might want something entirely different than most people do,
Yeah,
but it's like every relationship you have is going to reflect back to you your healed and unhealed stuff.
right.
So it's wherever you go, there you are. It doesn't matter whether
Yeah,
you're in a throuple or you're with another person, like that if you're in a throuple, those
or
people are
with
gonna push your
nobody.
button, or with nobody. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
if you're by yourself and you're out in the world and you've got trauma and you've got triggers and buttons, like it's still
yeah,
gonna get pushed in some way. It's gonna happen.
yeah.
And but usually when we have these more intimate relationships, when there's sex involved, that the risk is raised and there's just so much more
Yeah.
vulnerability there. So the conditions are really ripe for triggers and ruptures and transformation. Um, like heightened emotions, but also very low level
Mm-hmm.
emotions too, because of the level of chemical and emotional bonding that
Mm-hmm.
happens.
I think I said it in my head just now. Every moment is a mirror. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
that like I think about that when you're dancing with somebody else, like they are fantastic mirrors for you and your energy and all your stuff. Like I think that think about all the energy that's contained in one person, and then they stand next to you and dance around. It's like it's a lot. It's a lot to process, but it's also I think a pretty deep gift that we give each other all the time, about how we interact with each other and show up for each other, and possibly, and I think it is possible that we can make great things together. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we can come together and have fun.
Yeah.
It can be fun.
Um, I was listening to Abraham Hicks today, and she said amazing thing, this amazing thing came through, and it was like, we're not here to like fix or help each other. We're actually here to um, cause other like people to deepen like their asking. Like we're here to like cause them to like ask for more. So
Yeah.
we're not like we're here to help each other like evolve and grow and expand, not necessarily like keep keep each other from discomfort or protect or
Right.
not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
necessarily it's like to it was worded so it was really I was like it's so amazing just the way it was said. um but
Makes you
yeah,
think
it
about like
really
drawing people forward in, like to come closer into the fire, you know, to like ask for more.
yeah, it was like to give. It's like if you are kind of just fully expressing and being yourself, like you're going to naturally trigger other people to also expand and either like ask for more um because they like what's going on or they don't like it, and it's like what their reaction to it is causing them already to begin to evolve. So when you think about it, it's like we're always changing and evolving, like we can't escape it. It's
No.
just like this it's like a little wild when you just start to think about it that way.
Yeah.
It's like wow, we're always like changing and kind of mutating and influencing each
Right.
other all the time.
We are on the move, like it or not.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
um and I think, yeah, I think we already said this, but when it comes to marriage and monogamy, it's like I do think that for a long time people have opted into it to try to lock down or find some form of security or control in a way, like
Mm.
ownership,
Yeah.
like now I have you and now I'm like safe, and that means okay, I'm done.
Right.
I don't have to do anything else, right?
Yeah.
And that's where things get stale because our human nature is to grow and evolve, and there is nothing that you get to just hold on to. Like that is like you'll discover if you've ever tried to do that with something, you will know that the tighter you try to grab onto something, the more it will just slip through your fingers. And the
Right.
more that you hold something loosely, the more it will likely stay because it's like, oh, this is nice. It's
Mm.
like a soft perch as opposed to,
Right.
this happening, like the
But I
holding
made
on
the
to.
but I made the prison bars golden for you, dear.
Right. And so it's like I think like when I was talking about some of the words that come up, like the negative things that come up around monogamy can be this like loss of freedom or loss of identity or loss of self, right? Like, oh, I'm never going to be able to fuck another person or this or that. And it's like, whatever your marriage is with that other person or that your monogamous agreement, it's like, I think you can kind of decide what that commitment looks like. And
Hmm.
like and I think this is where words kind of fail us, or these labels fail us,
Yeah.
because
Right.
our unique desire for human experience is not going to necessarily fit into these categories or conventional things, because there's families now where like people are divorced and they're remarried and then they've got there's stepkids, and there's blended families, and there's just so many different permutations of
Yeah.
this. And I think that we should focus on and like celebrate the success of love and relationship. And when you have children that are really thriving and flourishing, or when you find yourself very happy, like that helps everybody, like that
Mm-hmm.
heals communities and that causes massive ripple effects.
Yeah.
And if you're focusing on really what you want to create, and you're um, not relying on labels, um, then you get to make your own definitions of like what your relationships are, and then you get to move in that direction and like create more freedom and beauty and excitement and joy. It's like your marriage or this like monogamous relationship that you have doesn't have to be defined by your past or by social definitions or by the collective unconscious. Yeah.
Let it be defined by your happiness.
Yeah, your happiness, your joy, your expansion, like your growth. um whatever you like, what you want it to be, like
Right.
you get to decide.
It just makes me think about the dilemma of like married having kids but want to get a divorce. It's like, oh, we're gonna stay married for the kids. But it's like, well, you're both unhappy, and that will definitely infect the system. But it's
Yeah.
good to both be around. About that sort of like balancing act of like keeping something going, letting something go, all the things you have to sort of like weigh in tow.
Yeah, I mean, then you want to ask yourself, are we staying together for the kids? Is it from a place of fear because I'm afraid that this,
Right.
or is it from a place of inspiration?
Yeah.
Usually
Right.
it's anything from a place of fear is actually just going to create more
Right.
of that the unintended effect.
Right. Wherever you go.
Wherever you go, there you are.
All
Truly.
right. Pretty good. I dig
Good.
it. All right. Let's call it a thing.
All right. It's a thing.
Okay. This is number 18. Marriage and monogamy. We talked about it some.
I
Talked
think we
about all this.
talked around it.
Yeah.
Or there's definitely more, but then there's like so many other topics that
Yeah.
go in and out of this. There's like betrayal, trauma,
Yeah.
codependence is a huge thing that I wanted to talk about. I did
Right.
a little bit, but there's a lot.
Right.
Codependence is huge, I think, in marriage, well, in any relationships. But
Yeah,
sure.
we could probably do other like episodes of just like drilling down on a particular topic and then just riffing on that for a while too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, okay, August. Today's August 12th. We're recording it. 2020. What year is this? 22.
2022.
Damn, we're flying into the future. Anyway, thanks for hanging out, Angela.
Like that.
Okay, so emotional.
Yo, later.
Peace.